Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, we're breaking down the best young cores in the NBA. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to rank 10 to 1, and we're going to have a great time trying to figure out who we think the best young groups of talent are across the league. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What is this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce Simon is here with me. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? Man, it's been a 4-day weekend, Easter break for me and my family, and now it's back to normal life, back home, doing podcasts, back to school tomorrow. So back to the normal grind after a few days off at the in-laws.
Well, Bryce, I have an important development for you.
Okay.
Somehow my TikTok algorithm has figured out that I will almost always stop when it's a video of, I guess that they're like cows or horses getting their hooves cleaned.
Yeah, sure.
Or like,
yeah.
grinding them down and like making sure that there's no like health problems or anything like that if they're limping or anything like that. So yeah, I've gone into farm life now, Bryce. We're learning more and more every day.
It's funny. I've talked a lot about algorithms over the weekend. I don't have TikTok, but Facebook Reels or videos or whatever Facebook has. And I get caught watching the ones where it like, straightens the lawn, like edges it correctly or cleans up a really bad looking lawn. And then motivational videos. So like Eric Thomas and some of those guys, Inky Johnson, like those guys are guys I love listening to. So that is what that is one place where I love the algorithm because I can just scroll through those things if I want to waste 10 minutes and it's a good stuff. So I know it's not all good in that world, but some of it's good.
That's really funny. Okay, so today we're doing best young course in the NBA. We're going to dive right in. We're going to talk about the way that we did this to start. As people who are longtime listeners of the show know, I tend to categorize these guys by rookie scale contracts. As I started to go down the process of beginning this, I sent Bryce like 6 messages, maybe more overnight.
I woke up
groups of people, and Bryce woke up with like 8. Yeah.
Peek behind the curtain. I wake up the next morning and I'm like, man, why do I have 9 text messages? Oh, it's only from 2 different people. Oh, 8 of them are from Sam. And it's just your process of how you change your mind through all of this.
So at first I tried to figure out like, all right, do I want to include like 25 and under guys? I tried to do one where I included like 24 and under guys. And then it was like, well, okay. So I'm including Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but I'm not including Jason Tatum when they're like a few months in terms of birthday apart. That didn't feel right. And then I'm trying to like include, certain guys to like make it seem right. I don't know. So at the end of the day, we just decided rookie scale contracts. Anybody who is currently on a rookie scale contract in the NBA as of the 2023-2024 season. That means Anthony Edwards is included, despite the fact that he has signed a massive extension moving forward. LaMelo Ball, same deal. Tyrese Halliburton, same deal.
Desmond Bane.
Desmond Bane. Somebody like Ja Morant, who is in the first year, Zion Williamson as well, in the first year of their rookie scale deal, not included, right? So, or if their rookie extension, not included. Why do we do it like that? Honestly, it felt like the cleanest break to me in terms of it, because when you start getting into like first and second year players on extensions, you start getting into like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's 25 years old. Jason Tatum, I think, just turned 26, right? These guys are, in my opinion, NBA veterans at this point. I think that's just kind of where the lay of the land sits for players like that. Because of that, it felt to me like it was a little bit off of the assignment if we started to include Shai or we started to include Zion was like an interesting one. John Morant was like kind of an interesting one to me. But then with Memphis, I kind of looked at it as like, well, Jaren Jackson has 2 years left on his contract, but he's actually younger than John Morant at this point. So how do I kind of square that circle? The cleanest break to me felt like rookie scale contracts. That's what we're going to do here. So that is who is eligible for these.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough and people can nitpick and all of that. Like at the end of the day, we're going to get into that anyway. And that's why it's going to be a fun conversation is some of these guys are established. Some of these guys are still projections. Some of these guys are on winning teams. Some of these guys are on historically bad losing teams. And so there's all this. And to me, I agree with you because then you take away a little bit of that. There's a couple guys like Anthony Edwards felt like a little bit different than some of the other guys on the list, even Halliburton, but you got to cut it off somewhere. And then you can't cut it off and say, well, we're going to do rookie scale, but not Anthony Edwards and, anything like that. So I felt like it was the cleanest as well. So we rock with it. It's going to be a good conversation either way.
Yeah. The key here is just defining these things to me, in my opinion. Like there's no right or wrong answer. Like when you're building a team around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in Oklahoma City, you're trying to build the best team around him and around, Jalen and Chet and everything as well. But you're not necessarily building for like the best young core, right? Like San Antonio is kind of trying to build for the best young core right now. Minnesota is in a weird world where like their young guy is their key guy, but they also have Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns. It's kind of why their whole thing is complicated, especially now with their burgeoning owner situation that seems very complex. So yeah, the key is defining these things. And the way we defined it was rookie scale contracts. Second piece of this. Did you have any sort of criteria that you went through as you ranked these? We're going 10, right? As you ranked these teams, what was your kind of defining way that you went about it?
So I kind of tried to stay to top end talent. Like that was like, especially when we get to the top 3, 4, who I assume will be relatively the same. I think the conversation will be very interesting. So I kind of went top end talent. I tried to go in a vacuum. So like not, this is the best guy to build a team, just in a vacuum. And then also like, would I trade this group of guys for this group of guys? So at a certain point, there was also a depth of talent in terms of how many of these guys are there. Like, I'll be honest, the team behind me is lower than their fans are going to want. But part of it, they're only as high as they are for me because there are quite a few names, even if I'm not sure that's how high end talent they're going to hit. So that I in general, it's not, a steadfast rule. In general, top end talent kind of won out. And then depth of talent. And then at a certain point, Sam, I did put in the fit of that talent. I don't want to like bury the lead, but I have the Hornets where they are at because I think Ball, Miller, Mark Williams makes a lot of sense as a trio in terms of not a whole lot of overlap in that stuff. So that at a certain point factored in as well.
So top end talent was my number one criteria. Like, do you have somebody in this group that can be a number one guy on a title team potentially?
Yes.
Was kind of the way that I thought about it. Number two thing that I really went through and looked in and did numbers on and everything was how much success have you had?
Sure. Okay.
This season in terms of what are your on-offs when you look at these cores together? What are these on-offs when you look at these cores together when you take the best player off the court, right? Like if, for instance, with Oklahoma City, if you take Shai off the court, what does this group look like in terms of the minutes they played this season? When you take for Houston, Fred VanVleet off the court, what does it look like for this young group together in terms of what their numbers and stats look like, right? Teams that I struggled with ranking. Houston was a tough one because the Jalen Green leap lately has really kind of thrown some things for a loop. Oklahoma City was a tough one because Shai is not included here, and trying to figure out where to put those guys alone in a conversation like this was really tricky. Charlotte and Indiana was kind of tough for me, to be honest, because I like a number of the guys on Charlotte. I like realistically I would say like 1.5 of the guys on Indiana.
Agreed.
And really like a lot of the other guys as role players, but trying to figure out where to put all of those guys as well is really, really tough. So that's where I sit on this as we go in. We've talked for 10 minutes. I think we should come close to diving in as soon as
just one question.
Yeah.
How much did you weigh actual production versus still weighing potential? Because like this is going to come into play right away here. Because I'm going to take a lot of heat for like my 11th team that I left out, and it may because I'm not projecting enough with these guys. Like I'll just say like where does Scoot Henderson rank based off like a rough rookie season, but he still was a number 3 pick and all the projections for a reason. I struggled with that, Sam, of these guys that have really produced already in 2 or 3 years, but some guys like even Cade Cunningham, who I think still has like super high end outcome, even though it hasn't translated to winning at all yet in his career.
Yeah. Like it's a total guessing game in that respect. I probably, given that I defaulted to like something resembling team success, right?
Yep.
I think I probably cared a lot about what you've done so far, except for maybe like we'll talk like there's one team that flies in the face of that in some respect. And we'll talk about that for a number of reasons. But yeah, Portland is a good place to start. So I had Portland at number 10, right on my list. So let's jump in and let's talk about Portland. So Portland is in a really interesting position where they have Scoot Henderson, who, if you're watching on YouTube, which by the way, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's the best place to watch the show. It's the best place to consume the show at this point because we have all these great clips. We have everything that you can see on the screen right now. If you're watching, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. You have Scoot Henderson, who has had a disastrous rookie season. Also, this is a team that really did not do much to like help him his rookie season, in my opinion. They have also drafted Shaedon Sharpe, who is another guy that's like a very clear project who dealt with injuries this year, and we didn't get to see the best of him realistically. So where do you place somebody like Scoot Henderson, like Shaedon Sharpe in the hierarchy of prospects league wide? It's really tricky. I think it's really hard to kind of determine that. So I ended up with Portland at 10. You ended up with them at 11. I don't really have a problem with leaving Portland off. And a big part of it is just what you believe Scoot will be at some point here.
Yeah, I don't like it. And, we talked a little bit ahead of time. We don't know each other's full order. These first 3 teams we're going to talk about are the 9, 10, 11 on both of ours in just a little bit of a different order. Do you still have, so I broke mine into with each individual team, like kind of franchise-ish player potential, and then like all-star, high-end starter role player, and then just a depth piece. Would you still put Scoot in like the franchise player potential even after this rookie season? Even if it's less confident in that, would you still have put him, if I said, hey, Sam, I want you to put each of these guys in one of these spots, or would it be just more like multi-time all-star, high-level starter tier?
I would put him in the franchise tier bucket just because I think being a guard is so incredibly difficult. I think my tier maybe for franchise player is probably maybe a little bit lower than yours. That's very plausible as well. But to me, what I'm looking for here is that Portland dealt with injuries this year. It was not a great situation around Scoot. And it was like, seriously, like Chauncey Billups is tough, man. Like it's tough. Like it doesn't feel like they have a great offensive scheme working around Scoot. Maybe he is probably just like an all-star upside kind of guy to me at this point. But I guess like to me, that is like a franchise guy that you build around in some respect. So that's a possible way to put this. Shaedon is a guy that I think is like a total wild card. He had a great final 10 games through the season last season. Looked like a guy that could really come in and make some, headway this year. And now, kind of a lost year. It feels like a little bit for him this year, not in a bad, like it just didn't build on those last 10 games in the way that we all hope maybe. And he's really young. It makes sense why he wouldn't. And the last 15 games of NBA season for these teams that are rebuilding are often so foolhardy to try and project in any way. But you just really hope that those guys kind of take their take the thought of what they could be and really run with it. So with Scoot, I think he still has time. With Shaden, I think he still has time. These guys are tremendous athletes. They have great upside. I thought Scoot got to his spots this year. It was just that last final product at the end of the day, the decision making, the fouling, the finishing around the basket, right? Like those were the issues. And I've moved, clearly people will see like Charlotte is ahead of them on my board. And, Brandon, I think I'm just gonna have to take an L on that one. Brandon Miller looks incredible, but Scoot is still a guy that I still have some faith in, which is why I ranked them 10 ahead of the team that you had at 10, who is.
Well, I had Toronto at 10. So I actually had the team you have.
Okay.
So I had Memphis one above, but like they're all right there. And so, and no, I mean, Scoot just has to finish. Like you said, he gets to his spots, he does his thing. Here's maybe where I broke kind of my own, because I still have him in the franchise player potential. Like I don't know if I'm crazy for that or not, but at 10, I actually had the Toronto Raptors, is where I started with. And I went back and forth between the Raptors and the Blazers. And obviously with Toronto, this conversation fully starts around Scotty Barnes. So I guess to talk, that same thing, Scotty's been really good. We've talked about Scotty quite a bit. Do you think he falls into that franchise player tier?
Well, it's clear that they're building around Scotty as if he is a franchise player.
Correct.
And he just made an all-star game as the third in his third year. So I think that you kind of have to throw him into that bucket. If we're throwing guys like Scoot in, if we're throwing guys like, Tyrese Maxey, the guy that made an all-star game in, the Philly just doesn't have a lot of guys like that. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they're building around him as if he is a franchise player. Yeah. I don't know if he is. I don't know if Scoot is necessarily, but the reality is that they're building around him like that. And if you're going to have Scotty as like a core piece for you moving forward, the way that his game looks, you actually do have to like build around him in some way. Now, like you have to find a star probably that works with him at a really high level. You have to find a point guard that works with him at a really high level, which is why I really like the idea of quickly with him. So with Scotty, I like where his game is headed, and that's why I ended up with them at number 9 on my board. I really strongly considered them at number 8 as well. Okay. But yeah, like I'm a fan of where Toronto is headed, sort of, I guess. Maybe not entirely. I'm like mixed on what their plan seems to be. I don't know what to think of it yet. This offseason is important for them.
Yeah. So essentially Scotty Barnes and quickly trumped Scoot Henderson and Shaden Sharp for me is like what it came down to between those two guys. That's it. We've talked about it a lot. I'm not sure Scotty is like the face of the franchise, the absolute best player, however you want to phrase it, but he is a very good player. He was having a very good season. And we've talked about Emmanuel quickly as well. And we're going to find out, he's going to go there. He's going to start. He's going to get a lot of minutes. He's going to get a lot of shots. And playing off of Scotty seems like something that he can do well. And then, I don't think he necessarily like is a huge part of this conversation, but someone like Grady Dick makes a lot of sense playing off Scotty Barnes as well in terms of spacing the floor. Like you need to get guys around Scotty Barnes that can space the floor and make shots. And that's something that Grady Dick can do. And so that's why I had them 10 over the Blazers, who I had 11. So I had Toronto 10, the Blazers 11, and Scotty and quickly being just a little bit more than Scoot and Shaden is kind of what got me there. So as we have lost Sam, there he is. He is back.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect.
I just went solo cam on Bryce while you were ISOing, man. Look, the Scotty Barnes piece of it is really interesting. How you evaluate quickly and what his contract is going to look like is really interesting in terms of how they're building. I didn't quite consider contract as much within this conversation because it felt a little bit difficult. But I like the fit of quickly as like a scoring guard next to Scotty Barnes. I think that's a really interesting fit. I think Grady Dick, floor spacer, can knock down shots. Really good fit with Scotty Barnes. I think that makes total sense. It's just going to be continued. Like you have to find probably a floor spacing big who can protect the rim. You have to find another playmaker in all likelihood in the backcourt who can really score the basketball. It's going to be fun to watch how they go about building this group. So the team you had at 9 then is Memphis. I
Yeah.
had Memphis at 11. So we had the same, we had 10 out of 11, and then all of our top 11 were the same. I had Memphis 11. You had them at 9. What made you go with Memphis at 9? Because, the players we're talking about here with Memphis are Desmond Bain, Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams, Zaire Williams, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, a couple others. So yeah.
I think, and maybe I miscalculated, I guess I gave Desmond Bain the benefit of, I guess I prioritized him over any of these others. Like, if I just look at top end talent, and I guess he doesn't have maybe the franchise, you're not going to build your team around Desmond Bain. And this is what I said, where maybe we've seen him on a really good team, even though it's a little bit of role player is not the right word, but playing off of Ja, maybe I gave him a bump, but I just felt bad, not having Desmond Bain. I definitely would have had him above Portland. Maybe there's an argument that with Scotty and Quickly, that's not enough to keep the Grizzlies above them. And then I just look at those other players you named, and while I don't know which one it's going to be, my vibe is one or two of those guys is going to pop. So maybe none of those carry the same name as Emmanuel Quickly, or none of them carry the same name as Shaedon Sharpe. But I just have this feeling that whether it's Vince Williams or Gigi, or, Jake LaRavia has played better recently, that one or two of those guys are going to pop. So there's a little bit of projection there in that. I guess I just trusted Desmond Bain as much as any of the number one guys we've talked about, even if maybe the ceiling isn't as high. We've seen him be very high level, and then trusting that a couple of these other guys go from role players to actual starters, maybe high-end starters.
Yeah, so I do get that. I think that's completely reasonable. Honestly, what we've seen from Gigi Jackson this year gave me real pause in terms of leaving them off. Ultimately, I did think that Scoot's ceiling is a little bit higher than Bain's ceiling, which is what made me default to Portland here. Bain is a freaking fantastic player. I do think that he is probably best suited as a number 3 on a really great team. And I just couldn't quite get to that level of putting them on. But I think there's a chance Gigi Jackson is a very real starter long-term, and could be more than that if things really break right with his development. Vince Williams looks like a long-term starter, 6th man kind of guy who could be really valuable for them. Santi Aldama gives them minutes, they're Jake LaRavia has been better recently. There are some real dudes there that could be intriguing for them long-term. I do think it was hard. They were the hardest one for me at the bottom here because of the Gigi factor.
Sure. Yeah.
Gigi was a guy that was a top 5 high school recruit who had a disastrous season last year at South Carolina and has looked way better this year and looks like the guy that we thought he was when he was in high school. If Gigi Jackson was in this coming draft class, he's in conversation for number 1 based on what we've seen this year, right?
Yeah, based off the new data, right? Based off what we've seen from. Yeah, and I guess that was my point of, okay, even if you say Scoot's ceiling is a little higher, but we've seen Bain be a 20-point a game guy in this league already. Even if somebody says Scotty is more of a build around type of player, I get it. I understand it. We've seen Bain be really, really good on one of the best teams in the league. And so I guess I carried a little bit of weight with that. And then, like you say, it's the GG X factor and the Vince Williams, what are the ceilings of some of these other guys? It's not that, but you could end up with 2 guys as high-end starters. And all of a sudden that's kind of the trump card over these other 2 teams that I just barely edged out with the Grizzlies.
Well, and the hard part with that too is they haven't played real basketball. Those guys yet.
That's true.
They just truly haven't.
Yeah.
Right. Gigi Jackson has been fantastic. Right. He has been really, really good for a rookie. And I think there is a case for him to be second team all rookie this year. Right. It's just, it's hard to know what he is in real, playing time right now, in real games, because we haven't seen it yet. Memphis has been so bitten by the injury bug that they just never have played Gigi in games that matter yet. And last year we saw him at South Carolina, in a semi-competitive environment, and it was frustrating. So like I think that Gigi's upside is like very, very high, and like we might look stupid having them at like even like 9, 10, 11, but I couldn't quite get there given the sample we've seen so far. So
Yeah.
let's move on. Let's
Okay.
go to number 8.
Okay.
I had the Detroit Pistons at number 8.
Same.
All right, there we go.
Pistons fans are going to be pissed. They're going to be they were so mad that they weren't in the graphic already. And I don't even know if they're like going to be mad at us. They're just going to be mad that this team has rebuilt for 4 years and it's not at least a top 5, top 3, young core.
I felt like Pistons fans were not mad at us. I felt like they were mad at the situation for what it's worth. So,
yeah.
Here we're talking about Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Osar Thompson, Isaiah Stewart, Marcus Sasser, Quentin Grimes. A whole lot of stuff there, I think is the way I would put it. Cade Cunningham, I think, is like a real dude, like can be like a franchise player. Might be better than like a couple of the guys listed above him. Like who you would take between Cade Cunningham and Brandon Miller, I think is like a really interesting conversation long term, trying to figure out like which one of those guys is the better building block. I think I would still default to Cade at the end of the day, but the problem is that Charlotte has another guy there that's like really, really good, which is why Charlotte comes ahead. Where you place Detroit here really comes down to, do you believe in Jaden Ivey? Do you think they believe in Jaden Ivey? Do you believe in Jalen Duren in a real way? Do you think Osar Thompson can fix the offense in a real way? What do you think that, Quentin Grimes can become after kind of a lost year with the Knicks this year and a great year last year where he was like an league average starting shooting guard, basically. What do you think Marcus Sasser is? Is he a sixth man or is he just like a point guard that can come off the bench and play 15 minutes a night, right? And just get buckets and hopefully defend once he continues to add more and more. So they just have a lot of stuff, which is why I ended up with them at 8 as opposed to lower, even like with Scotty Barnes being there and Scoot and everybody like that. But I couldn't quite get them higher because, man, has this team been bad. And I think I'm a little bit lower and frankly always have been on the non-Cade pieces, which is what it comes down to for me. Like you and we've known each other for 2 years now. Like, as we've talked, like I've always been lower on the non-Cade and frankly the non-Jaden pieces as well, because I'm a big believer in Ivy too. But that's kind of where I came down on it.
Yeah, we're similar there in that I still believe in this backcourt. I will say, for what it's worth, I don't think the organization, I shouldn't say that. I don't think Monty Williams believes in this backcourt. I don't think Jaden Ivey is the off-ball guard that he wants, either whether that's because of Jaden, if it's just an archetype thing, whatever. Now, again, I do not have intel. This is not me reporting anything like that. This is my opinion from watching every second of Detroit basketball for how many ever years I've done this now, including this season. Even as historically bad as it's been, I've watched every single second. So that's just my thought. But where they are still 8th is I really believe in Cade Cunningham. Like, I think he's really started to figure it out even more. And if he does put on a little more weight and figure out some of the finishing and some of that, it's going to be really special. And then you do have 3 guys who may be really good in terms of Jaden, Asar, Jalen. Now, I don't know if it's here or not. And if I don't know if it's all together or not, and, if we could say, hey, they're going to package 2 or 3 of these guys because they're about to have another top 5 pick and go get a star, but that's not the game we're playing. We're just playing like this group of guys. There's just a lot of them. And I do think that puts them over some of these other teams we've already talked about in terms of that.
So I wanted to bring up the Jaden Ivey stats over the course of the last like 15 or so games.
Okay.
Because, I think they're somewhat interesting, right? So Jaden Ivey, 17 points or 17 games here, started all of them, has only made 38% of his shots, 23% of his threes, averaging 16 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds. Not great numbers, right? Difficult to try and determine what he's going to be. But then like you kind of look at the stretch before that and it was way stronger, right? Like I don't totally know what to make of what we think Jaden Ivey is, because like if you look at the December 21st through February 13th stretch, he averaged like 19 points a game and was like really, really good and looked like a potential like dude as we're talking here, right? So here's that stretch here, like Jaden Ivey, 26 game stretch, 31 minutes a game, 19 points, 46, 41, 70, with 4.6 assists and 4.5 rebounds. Those are great numbers, right? Like those are the kind of numbers where you're like, oh, this is a second year building block. And then recently it's tailed off because it just feels like, it's honestly like, it does feel like to me, like you're saying, like it feels like the organization has less kind of like faith in him than it did previously.
Well, and I guess it makes, at some point they're going to have to make a decision, because you can't play. I mean, listen, I think you can play guys off the bench and make things work, and they refuse to stagger him and Cade, which is a whole nother thing that I write about after every game, and it doesn't even matter. But I think Jaden Ivey's process is flawed right now, and I would love to know why. If it's Jaden Ivey or if it's the coaching staff or what. I think he takes too many threes, Sam. The reason I stay so high on Jaden Ivey is because I watch every single second. And I watch the way this kid can attack the lane like not many other people are able to do in the NBA. And so I would just like to see him always default to that. He should never take a one pass transition 3-point attempt, and he does it way too often. And so that's why I stay high on Jaden Ivey, is I think if you take the process and fix it just a little bit, and the efficiency, like I'm not saying it's not all on him or not some of it on him, fix the efficiency and improve it, then you're in a really good space. And listen, his defense isn't great, but it has improved. You want to see improvement from these young guys from year 1 to year 2. It did get better, especially around the margin, second effort, those type of things. And so I have just a little bit of faith in him. We barely talked about Jalen Duren or Asar. I guess I just think one of those guys is going to be a second tier guy for this team. And that's why I have them at least at 8.
Yeah. So real quick on Duren, right? The defense is just not improved this year is my big thing. Like
Correct.
He has not been a very good defender throughout his 2 years in the league. And to be the kind of guy who's not going to be a shooter, right? We think that there are passing skills there that are latent passing skills, but like he's never consistent. It's always been flashes. He's never consistently brought the passing to the table. You really you have to be a great defender, or else you're Andre Drummond, right? Yep. Like, and Andre Drummond made multiple All-Star games, but like Andre Drummond would not make All-Star games in today's league. So I struggle a little bit with Duren. Asar is like a total like offensive like rewrite to me. Like you have to he does some things like in terms of being a connective player and in terms of like being able to like make his athleticism felt on the court in transition as a cutter, but like the skill level, it is just not remotely there right now.
I'll tell you, the fan base would love to trade Jaden Ivey, and I think are getting there with Jalen Duren. I would say the majority, I think they think Asar is the second most important young piece. They would. I
disagree with that for what it's worth.
Yeah, it's and maybe it's just kind of like they haven't seen what they wanted to from Ivy and Duren, so now Asar's kind of the guy. But it's been very interesting just to kind of track where, because Duren is starting to take heat in general. I feel like the fan base is seeing more and more like, man, you don't have this defensive anchor and rim. He had a game recently where he did have like 2 or 3 blocks, 2 or 3 steals, some deflections. Like, okay, this was good. There's hand activity in the ball screen, all of those type of things. But those games just haven't shown up nearly enough in his young career. He is young, right? He's young, but you would like to start seeing it improve sooner rather than later, hopefully.
Yeah, I would still rank these guys: Cade, Ivy, probably Duren, Asar, Grimes, Sasser, Stewart is where I'm at, I would say. Because Stewart is still involved here too.
Yeah, I'd put Stewart over. Sasser has been interesting to track this year. I would just also emphasize, like, to me, it would be Cade tier. Like, there would definitely be a hard cut off. Those next 3 in some sort of order, probably a cutoff again. And then, I mean, we have a bad taste in our mouth with Grimes right now just because he has shot the ball so poorly and been injured.
Right.
Like we haven't really got a good look at Quentin Grimes to be completely fair to him. So it's hard to say with him necessarily. And again, Sasser's role will be very interesting because he's been like, it's been create his own shot. Like that's what he's been off the bench, like nuclear scorer, create separation, take his own shot, but not really create for others or knock down shots off the ball or anything like that. So,
okay. Number 7, I have the Indiana Pacers.
Okay.
You do not, it sounds like.
I have them 6, so we're right there.
Okay.
So I'm interested to see if we end up flipping these teams or if who I have at 7 is even higher on yours. But yeah, I have them here at 6.
So the Indiana Pacers, a really fun basketball team led by Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton is here as a rookie scale guy for the final time. His extension kicks in on July 1st. He has been utterly fantastic for the first, I would say, third of this season. And then after he suffered the hamstring injury, it felt like things got much, much, much more difficult for him. I can't totally tell why. I think it's like just separating, and it feels like the shot hasn't been nearly as consistent in terms of, just knocking them down from 3. His volume from 3 is also down over the course of that time. He's averaging 7 3-point attempts per game and only making 31% of them. This is a guy that I thought it was fairly reasonable to like say is kind of a different version of like high volume Stephen Curry early in the season from 3, where he was making like 44% of 10 3-point attempts per game. It was a very different kind of player. And I'm not saying he was going to be as valuable as Steph, but that was kind of the plan with Halliburton, right? You have this dynamic elite floor spacer and pull-ups, elite decision maker passer who's like creative and who can lead transition opportunities. But it's hard when, the second half of the season, his last 28 games have not been quite as good. And honestly, like you do wonder if he should have been playing this time or if he was doing so in order to try and make all NBA and thus become Supermax eligible. So trying to parse through all of those things, my take was basically that I think Halliburton's going to be like an elite level, probably number 2 guy on a title team. I'm willing to hear out if somebody thinks he can be like a number 1 on a title team. Like I will listen to that argument, but I think where I'm at right now is that it's more likely to be as a number 2 guy on like a great team.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still living in the early season Tyrese Halliburton, one, because we called him as a breakout candidate. And I know like it was under specific context with that as well. We all know that Tyrese had already broken out in a certain way, but we were talking about he took that jump that we talked about being so hard to take from where he was 2 years ago or 1 year ago, whatever it was, to what he is this year. And I guess maybe I've given him a pass since he's returned from injury, because I'm kind of like, I just feel like maybe he did return too soon. Hamstring injuries are tough and not easy to deal with, not easy to come back from regardless. So maybe I'm still living in that realm. And that's why I still like, he just was able to, he was above some of these other guys that I put as franchise type players, I guess. He's, as almost everybody we're going to talk about now moving forward has at least one of those guys. So because of that, I guess I just held him in that high of a regard, even though I don't know that I like Andrew Nembhard. I like Aaron Nesmith. Jarris Walker's still interesting. Like they have a lot of guys. Maybe that was another reason why I ended up with them at 6, is though they have a lot of guys, Obi Toppin, even Isaiah Jackson. And then Benedict Mathurin was my guy in that draft. And so I guess I just can't quit on him just yet. So there's a little bit of projection and wishful thinking maybe with me having them at 6 instead of 7, where, I mean, as I look at it, the team I have in 7th, this may be my mistake, is how low I have this team in 7th.
I don't think it is. The reason for that is, okay, so trying to put together an all NBA team right now, right? Luka, Shea, Giannis, Jokic, Kawhi, one of the Lakers guys, let's say AD or LeBron. I don't know if both will get there. I think you probably go Brunson over Halliburton this
Yes.
year, right?
Yep. I would.
Donovan Mitchell can't get to the
I say
games
he's not going to be
thing
there.
at this point. Stephen Curry can. I think I would still take Steph over Halliburton, given the way that Halliburton closed the year.
Yeah.
Obviously, Jason Tatum, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards. Interesting comparison points there, I think. De'Aaron Fox is another name that'll come up. There's just a lot of guys. There are a lot of guys that like you really have to parse through for all NBA this year. And I don't know if maybe Halliburton gets there. He might be an all NBA guy. And he might be like a third team all NBA guy. Like De'Aaron Fox is another name that will have to be considered, obviously. Sabonis, another name, certainly. I just don't know if he's going to quite get to that level this year. I think he will get there in the future. And then the rest of these guys, I mean, Jarris, we just don't know what he is.
Nope.
Aaron Naismith is, a good role player wing, 3-and-D guy. Mathurin, I don't know what to do with him now. I don't have a lot of faith.
So that
what we've seen.
He's probably the guy this is where I'm going to make a mistake with having them above the team I have in 7th is I probably have him in the wrong tier just based off what I thought pre-draft. He should just be in the starter role player tier and nothing more than that based off what we've seen thus far. And the team I have in 7th has 2 guys. Their 2 guys trump Halliburton by himself. So I think I made a mistake with my ranking here.
I think that's where I'm at. The 2 guys that this next team has are a little bit above that level. The thing with Mathurin is just like the feel didn't get better this year. So that was ultimately it. The feel just didn't feel like it took that next jump. As a passer, Connor Andrews, shout out Connor Andrews for the super chat. As a defender, like the feel just still isn't there in my opinion. So yeah, it's tough. It's really, really tough.
I was hoping Mathurin would just be like a competitive, fiery, the athleticism, like all of that would get him to where he was a good enough defender to really at least be neutral, right? Like even if the fundamentals, even if off ball, like I remember watching some of the college, that was before I really truly scouted. Essentially that draft class, I scouted the top guys because it was a Pistons thing, not an actual NBA draft thing. And it's like, okay, this maybe, the off ball stuff, maybe it'll get better. Maybe just the competitiveness will, carry him through. And it doesn't seem like it has.
Yeah. And look, Ron Burgundy brings up a great point in the comments. Halliburton's clearly still like not 1,000% from that hamstring. Doesn't have the ability to get that space on his step back because of the way his shot is in terms of like how long it takes him to load into the shot. I think that space generation for him is even more important than it is for most guys. So look, I think that's all 100% right. Like, Derek Reynolds asks, like, how much does the new reffing paradigm have to do with Halliburton's lessened effectiveness? I think it's more the hamstring, like, ability to generate backward space than that. But
and that could have caused him to have a tougher time adjusting to it, though. Like, I think Tyrese Halliburton is talented enough that he would adjust to it. But if he was injured as these rules kind of slowly came into effect or abruptly came into effect, depending on what you think, and then he comes back, he's not 100%, he's slight frame to begin with, it's going to be hard for him to adjust that more than if he was completely healthy and playing through all of it to begin with.
Yep. And Brian K brings up the biggest point with Halliburton, which is like the defense is still like it's a real question and it's a real problem for him right now. He needs to continue to improve on that end of the court. Okay. Number 6 on my list, the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah. Yep.
They're the team you had at 7, it sounds
They
like.
are. Yeah. Yep.
So the reason that I had them at 6 ahead of Indiana is because I think Brandon Miller is a dude.
Yes. Yep.
Like, I think Brandon Miller is just straight up a dude. Now, this was kind of a tier break for me. Like,
same.
The top 5 teams are the top 5 teams, in my opinion.
Yep.
And honestly, like, I think you can rank the top 5 teams like a number of different ways, and I think it's reasonable. Charlotte was like pretty clearly 6 for me, though. And the big reason why they were clearly 6 as opposed to in that top group was that I have a lot of questions on LaMelo staying healthy long term. I think that we all just frankly have to at this point. It feels terrible saying that, but like we're talking about a guy that's played 51 games in his rookie year, 36 in his third year, now going to play 22 this year. When he plays, he's fantastic. Like you look at his numbers the last 2 years that he's played, and probably wasn't 100% for all of those games, right? Like 23.5 points, 6 rebounds, 8.3 assists, shooting 42-37 on super high volume from 3, 85% from the line, like just a ridiculous player over the course of those 2 years, but we just haven't seen him enough. And that's where it gets tricky. I have Brandon Miller as like, if I was ranking the prospects on Charlotte, I would have Brandon Miller ahead of LaMelo right now.
Yeah, this is where I screwed up. I should have had Brandon Miller. I should have considered him more. It wouldn't have broke the tier. We're actually, I know maybe the listeners, this isn't, this isn't sports talk, at 2:00 in the afternoon where you want to come for a debate of us just disagreeing to disagree. Guys, I want you to know God's honest truth. We didn't talk, like we talked right before we recorded just a little bit, but we did our rankings on complete separate pieces of paper, Google Docs, all of that. So this is just following in line the way it is. If I had to redo it, I would have the Hornets over the Pacers. I did not have Brandon Miller nearly high enough in consideration. I had Benedict Mathurin overrated, and the combination of LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, that goes over Tyrese Halliburton. So I think this is a good call by you.
So I think people have been paying attention to Brandon Miller just as like the guy that was the number 2 guy in this draft class, right? Like has been really valuable and useful, but like, I'm not totally sure that people like understand how ridiculous Brandon has been like since basically mid-January. Brandon Miller, I just pulled up his numbers here for people to look at. Since January 19th, he's averaging 19.7 points, so almost 20 points per game, shooting 45, 37, 82, 4.8 rebounds, 2.6 turnovers, positive assist to turnover ratio. He's just been really good.
High volume threes too. That was high volume 3-point attempts on 37% or whatever that was.
He's taken like 8 3-point attempts per game. He's been a monster. Basically since the calendar turned to mid-January. He like I am worried that he is too low. Like put it this way. So like one of the teams I have in the top 5 is Houston, right? I think I would take Brandon Miller over all of the Houston guys right now.
Houston's a tricky one, and I don't want to get into it too much, but yeah, because you could argue that the top end talent in terms of they have a bunch of really good talent. Like they're in the top 5 for good reason because they have a bunch of dudes that we're going to talk about. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument there that Brandon Miller is a prototypical wing who can really score the ball. We've talked a little bit about his defense, at least what it seems like his defensive intensity and energy is going to be. And then I also want to just point out, and I said it earlier, LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and Mark Williams, like that just fits, right? Like this is made, I mean, they were going to be above the Pistons anyway, but there's no questions about those 3 guys. And like, I don't know what Mark Williams ends up being. I kind of have him as like a starter. I don't know if he ends up as a high level starter, but those 3 guys together make a whole lot of sense. And it's real easy to piece around those guys. Caveat, if they can stay healthy.
Yeah, and like with Brandon Miller particularly, and like with LaMelo and Charlotte, comparing them to Houston, like if people wanted to rank Charlotte ahead of Houston, saying that like LaMelo and Brandon Miller are better than anybody on Houston, I would get that. Like I would understand that argument. It's just for me, I put them slightly lower than those guys because of the injury factor with LaMelo more than anything. Brandon Miller is a real dude though. Like a very, like, look at some of these things we're watching on YouTube right now. Like just the like ability to get to the mid-range jumper with like, ease, and the floaters in the paint. And, he's going to knock down like shots coming off of dribble handoffs. And then he's going to step back 3. Like he's just a ridiculous player. I think Brandon Miller has been just absolutely fantastic as a rookie, and a very clear first team all rookie guy, and very much looks like, to me, like the building block that Charlotte really, I think, needs in addition to LaMelo Ball, given LaMelo's questions right now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his field goal percentage by distance. He's 66%, 0 to 3 feet. That was a huge question mark coming out of college. Was he able, going to be able to finish at the rim? The mid-range stuff has been okay, all over 40%, 51% between 16 feet and the 3-point line. And then we talked about the 3-point shooting. So he's doing a lot of what he needs to do in his archetype and his role.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. Now we get into the top 5, and this is where I think people are just going to get mad at us, and I hate it. Okay, I ended up with Houston at 5.
So did I.
And the reason for Houston at 5.
If you're mad, go watch last week, Sam. If anybody's mad at us about Houston right now, go watch last week if you haven't already.
And we talked so much positively about Houston. Like, I love what they're doing. I'm so excited about them. And I think, like, in terms of depth of talent,
they might be number one.
They might be number one. Like, they probably are number one in terms of depth of talent.
Yep.
But I don't think that they have the guy, is my problem. And on top of it, they have not had the same success that, for instance, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Orlando have had at this point in the season. If you go through and you look at, for instance, Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün playing together this season, they're like a minus 0.7 in 1,600 minutes. If you look at Jalen without Şengün, plus 3.9 in 700 minutes. If you look at Şengün without Jalen, plus 4.3 in 400 minutes. If you look at Jalen and Şengün without Fred VanVleet on the court, they are a minus 9.8. If you look at anything with Houston without VanVleet, it's a serious problem in terms of their on-off numbers. And that's okay. That's not like a death knell for them long-term. God, no. Like, I think that this team is in a really, really positive position, and they have all the Brooklyn picks coming. Like, if we considered assets as well, like, they would rank higher on this list. But, like, you look at what Orlando has done, for instance, like Paulo and Franz without Wendell Carter Jr., they're a plus 1.6, which is better than Green and Şengün, like, with Fred on the court, right? Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren this year, minus 0.3 without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the court this year in about 600 minutes. That's like slightly better than Green and Şengün with Fred VanVleet on the court, right? So basically Jalen and Chet have better numbers without Shai on the court than Green and Şengün do with Fred VanVleet, who's like this utterly fantastic elite player on the court, right? Those are the kind of things that, like, really helped to sway me a little bit more toward Houston at 5. I went into this project assuming that I would have them at like 3 probably, but I ended up having a couple teams below them because of that.
I don't think I could have ever got them into the top 3. And that's just because when we get to those top 3 teams, at least for me, the sheer ceiling, at least of 2 of those guys, of really, it ends up being 4 guys spread out amongst 3 teams, is just too high to justify anybody over them in terms of the way I approach this. Like, Victor Wembanyama could be the face of the NBA someday. At the end of the day, I'm taking that no matter what other pieces are around it over this multitude of Rockets talent. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's just how I approach this. And I couldn't get them over Orlando, Sam, just because Orlando's been so good, like all of the stuff you just talked about. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's Paolo and Franz and Jalen Suggs leading the charge for that team. And while, yes, it has been Şengün at times and Green at times, and, some of these other guys, Jabari has played well. Like, I love Jabari. We just did the breakdown on Amin, and I love that so many people have watched that on YouTube. And if you haven't, go watch it and show it to a friend. But at the end of the day, I don't know. Tell me the guy on the Rockets who is definitely 100% going to be better than Paolo Banchero. Like, I just don't know that you can tell me that. And even if you can project it, So far, it hasn't happened. The Magic have won games with their young guys being the focal point, where the Rockets have won games with, at the very least, Fred contributing a lot.
So like Franz Wagner has had like a catastrophic shooting season from 3, right?
Yeah.
He's still averaging like 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists per game, and has been like really, really good. And we'll talk about them in a minute here. But like, it's just really, really hard when you look at like Franz Wagner has had a better year than Jalen Green. Jalen Green's like this past month is better than anything we've seen from Franz or Jalen at this point. But it's a month in March against like a schedule that has not been ideal. And then we saw, against Dallas, for instance, they trapped the hell out of them a lot of the time. And that was a problem, right? So trying to figure out how to rank these teams is difficult. The bigger question that I had for you that I wanted to talk about was, how would you rank the talent on Houston in terms of long-term, like what how you would like value these players?
I'm of the mindset that Jalen or Alperen 1 is the guy you're going to have to hitch your wagon to. Then I would probably go Amin, Jabari, Cam, Tari.
I think I would go Şengün, Jalen, Amen, Cam, Jabari, Tari.
Yeah.
Is where I'm at on it long term. And I would have had Jalen last on this, or no, 5th on this list
a month ago.
But with Jalen taking this leap and figuring out like a lot of his tools, that spikes him to where it's like, oh no, this guy might be like a real, like this is like Zach LaVine stuff that we're seeing, like prime Zach LaVine, like where Zach was like very clearly like an all NBA-ish, all-star guy, and Jalen is still only 22 or 23 if I remember correctly. So like where we're at is like a really, really high level player already if he continues this.
The process that we talked about in the video breakdown, Sam, that's what's important for people to remember in terms of, we didn't just say, oh my gosh, look at all these shots he's making, this is incredible. Now, some of it was, right? We said, are these step backs sustainable? We didn't say that it's not sustainable for him to attack the paint, draw 4 guys, kick to Jabari in the corner for the game tying 3. Like, that's very much sustainable if he's willing to do it. And so that's why I'm willing to buy into this month-long stretch in terms of, if the process stays, if the defense stays, if the rebounding stays, if the passing stays, I can live through the 3-week stretch where he shoots 29% from 3 on some of these shots that he's absolutely going to go through. He's not going to shoot 45% on the shot diet he's taking, but I can live with the downs of the shooting stretches if he's doing the defense, the rebounding, and everything else.
Yeah, this is a bad take by me, by the way. If I said Cam over Jabari, I would have Jabari over Cam right now. Did I say Cam over Jabari?
I didn't think so, but maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. So if I said, I would have Jabari over Cam right now. Like I would have Jabari and Amen like pretty tight. Jabari's been great this year. Like he's been really, really good. That's where I kind of fell on it for them.
Yep.
Do we have any other strong? So to just answer that question fully on my end, as I stutter through that, Jalen Green, Alperen Şengün, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason is how I'd rank those guys. And I love them all. And I think that they're all like going to be real dudes. They're all starting caliber players. It wouldn't surprise me if 3 of those guys ended up as all-stars, but I don't think they have the number 1 guy.
Yep.
Which is why they ended up falling a little bit here.
Yep. That's where I'm at as well.
In addition to team success compared to the next 2 teams on this list. So at number 4, I have Orlando.
Same.
Okay. The Orlando Magic have Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner. They also have Jalen Suggs, who has been terrific this season and should be an all-defense guy. Anthony Black, who was a top 6 pick last year, top 6 pick. I think he went 6th. Jett Howard, who went in the lottery. Cole Anthony still applies here. And then Caleb Houston and Chuma Okeke, right? The key for me was Paulo and Franz. I like Paulo and Franz better as a combo than any two players that you can put together from Houston. I still am a very big believer in Jalen Suggs as a player. I think that everybody should be, based off of what we've seen from him this year. He has been so impactful every single time he takes the court. And oh, by the way, do you know what Jalen Suggs is shooting from 3 right now this year?
I do, because I had the stats ready to talk about. He's shooting 40% on over 5 attempts a game.
You're goddamn right he is. Jalen Suggs has just been fantastic. Like, there is a real case. Jalen Suggs has been like a top, I don't know, 75 player in the league this year.
Well, and that's the thing.
Like
his
something like
three-point
that.
shooting isn't the best thing he does. Like, defensively, he's a nightmare for opposing perimeter players. So the fact that he then goes and shoots 40% from 3, like, this was the ultimate what needed to click for him. If this is real, he was a major component of what helped me get Orlando. Not that I was trying to, but what ended up with Orlando over Houston. Like, yes, it's Paolo and Franz, but Jalen Suggs being another guy I actually really believe in helped me balance the amount of guys the Rockets had compared to the amount of guys the Magic have.
Right now, according to EPM, which is the model that people best like in terms of like an all-in-one that people look at league-wide and try and come up with a conclusion on players. It's just a number. It's not a be-all end-all necessarily. Jalen Suggs is currently ranked as the 35th most impactful player in the league right now this year. That feels aggressive to me, just based on where he is offensively, and I do think that like offense matters more than defense. But right now he's averaging 12.4 points, 3.1 rebounds, 2.7 assists versus 1.9 turnovers, 46, 40, 76 from the field. And the defense is just like truly, truly, truly elite. He is absolutely a dude that is worth, like, seriously, he is worth more than whatever Emmanuel Quickley is going to get this summer. He's a better basketball player than Emmanuel Quickley has ever been. And I think like Emmanuel Quickley is about to get like 25 this summer. So if you told me Jalen Suggs ends up getting $30 million this summer per season, I look at that and I'm like, it's probably aggressive, but it's probably not wrong based on his impact right now. Like, you look at what Orlando is doing. I mean, like, there's a real case that like he is just as impactful for them as Franz. He is just as impactful for them on both ends as Paulo. And look, we say this is like this show, particularly me. I've always been very high on Jalen Suggs. I just really can't, come to the conclusion of anything other than he is a fantastic elite, 3-and-D-ish point guard, I guess.
Well, yeah, and he's a nice fit for them because he doesn't need to be a true point guard, right? Like, he doesn't need to be a primary initiator creator because, as we see in these clips, Paolo's going to play with the ball in his hands a lot. Franz is going to play with the ball in his hands a lot. Like, those guys can break down the defense. So can you think of there are better veteran versions of this, but a better young rookie scale guard to come in, guard the heck out of the perimeter, make up for a little bit of what Paolo has, deficiency wise defensively, and then just space the floor. And then, hey, if those guys are both off the floor or one is off the floor, he can be the second side initiator, the second side creator. It's just, some of this is fit, right? Like I talked about at a certain point, I added in fit. Part of the Rockets thing is, I don't know that Green and Şengün both reach their peak playing together. I think these 3 guys can all reach their ceilings playing off of each other.
I totally agree with that. And like, look, they're in a really weird spot in terms of like salary cap moving forward, right? Because I don't know, like, does Franz Wagner get maxed this summer? Probably, right? And then Suggs, like I said, like just given the way that guards are getting paid right now, if I'm Wasserman and his representation, I'm going in and saying, like, look, I'm not asking for a max, but I'm asking for probably what Tyler Hero got, right? I'm asking for what Jordan Poole got, because Jalen Suggs this year has been better than those guys have ever been. So, like, what the numbers are the numbers at that point, right? Like, in terms of what the salary is going to be. But like, then you're kind of maxing out some things a little bit. You really have to go this summer and go get your core pieces around those guys, right? Because this is probably their last shot at like real substantial cap space, given where the things are going. The key here for me is like whatever you think Paulo is going to be, right?
Yes.
Like, we've talked a little bit about Franz Wagner. I think Wagner is a stud. I think that like there's a very real case that Wagner has been Orlando's best player, like beyond Paulo, obviously. But the way that Paulo gets like an insane, obscene amount of defensive attention every single night and still is able to get shots, still is able to create shots, still is able to get into the mid-range and score. This is not like the best, most well-functioning offense, right? Like, he is still their highest upside guy if things really break right. And frankly, I think he is their most important guy, even if Franz and Jalen are the guy that bring it on both ends. Paulo is still the most important one, because for as much as we love Jalen and Franz, they can't create shots like Paulo can. Paulo is the one that kind of holds up their offense like on his shoulders a little bit. A lot of the time, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, and he's shooting 35% from three this season on 4 attempts. He's getting to the free throw line almost 7 times a game. You know, a very positive assist to turnover ratio, rebounding the ball. Like, I was very high on Paulo because I thought he could be kind of the hub of an offense. That's what I saw whenever I was watching his game in college. And I feel like that's where they've gone. And, you know, as they continue to build this thing with the right pieces around him and the floor spacing and get a little bit better offensively, I think he's going to be good enough defensively. Like, what's he probably capped? Neutral defensively. Like, if he can just get there, just be good off the ball, protect the rim a little bit, grab some rebounds. I just think with kind of his gravity as the hub of the offense, you know, makes up for any of that on the defensive end. I think he's had a really, really good year. And, you know, this isn't, you know, we talk about OKC in the playoffs and some of these other teams. I'm interested to see this Magic team in the playoffs, Sam. Like,
Fascinated.
This offense has been a drag at times in the regular season. What does that look like in the playoffs? How good are these guys really defensively when you get into a series? I think Jamal Mosley's done a really good job coaching wise. This is a team that's really going to be interesting come playoff time.
Yeah, look, they are the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. Cleveland is only a game ahead of them. New York is only a half game ahead of them. Like, there is a non-zero chance they are the 3 seed in the East. And I don't think they'll quite get there. I think they're probably more likely to end up in that 4-5, but like, they are closer to the 3 than they are to the 6 right now. And that's a huge credit to these dudes. It's a huge credit to Jamal Mosley. I think that I really strongly considered Orlando ahead of this next team.
Okay.
Like, really strongly considered it.
I had a tear break. I had a tear break actually at this point. So this interesting.
Yeah, no, I did not.
Cool.
I definitely did not. Paulo has been just such a real offensive, you know, creator for them, that they're able to make it work. And, you know, look, like, it's hard to have a team, you know, 3 lower than 4 here, when literally their 3 best players are all on rookie scale deals. All will be on rookie scale deals next year, by the way, too. So this is like not the last time that we will see these guys here in these rankings. And oh, by the way, we're now looking at them as like a potential 3 seed in the East, where if things really broke right, we'd be seeing like a pretty crazy circumstance. Like, I can't remember the last time that, you know, a team that had 3 guys on rookie scale deals. Like, is it that Oklahoma City team where like the 3 best players were all on rookie scale deals?
The Durant, Harden, Westbrook.
Yeah.
I don't have a name off the top of my head. I mean,
I don't have a name off the top of my head. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like anybody's drafted that well in back years. You know what you have to do 3 out of 4 years to get them all on the rookie scale. So yeah,
it's pretty wild. And look, like they just beat Portland by 1 tonight as we're talking, by the way. So like this is where we're at. 2017 Timberwolves basketball genesis brings up. I'm not totally sure about that. I'll have to look that up while we're talking. Okay, let's go to the number 3 team here. The Oklahoma City Thunder.
Sorry,
I have them at 3.
I'm looking up what basketball genesis. So that would be Levine, Wiggins, Towns.
Oh God, yeah, no, that's a troll answer. Yeah, he said it's a troll answer.
Oh, okay.
Gotta stop looking at the comment. I have to stop looking at the comments like that and assuming that it's going to be right. Okay, Oklahoma City is who I had at number 3.
Yeah, listen, I struggled with the top 3 really, really bad. I bounced them around all over the place. And you know who really made this hard for me was Jalen Williams. Like as much as I love Chet Holmgren, J-Dub made this hard for me because I'm like, what is his ceiling? You know, because the next 2 teams, we're talking guys that are the reason these next 2 teams are above is because they have guys who could legit be the best player in the NBA, right? Like that's why they're ahead.
Yes.
So my question then is, I thought I was going to have to debate this the other way. So you threw me for a loop here. Are 2 guys?
So you have Oklahoma City at 3 as well.
Yeah, I mean, I bounced it around, and I have these guys all in the same tier. I thought I was going to have to debate with you why Victor and the Spurs or Ant and the Timberwolves should be above the Thunder, but now I want to do it the other way. Like now I want to I almost want to play why aren't the Thunder 1 when you have these 2 guys who could be multi-time All-Stars, multi-time All-NBA defensive players, multi-time, whatever. Why are these 2 guys not more valuable than the singular Victor Wembanyama, the singular Anthony Edwards? And I know there's Devin Vassell and Jaden McDaniels if you want to add those as like the X factors, but to me this is 2 versus 1 versus 1. Or do you not see it that way?
I see it that way. No,
okay.
That's the way I see it. It's just that right now Anthony Edwards is the best player on a team that might be the 1 seed in the Western Conference. And Victor Wembanyama is like breaking basketball every single time. And like for as good as Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are, and I think the world of those 2, I think that anybody who has watched this show for years now knows that I am probably the biggest Jalen Williams fan that exists in certainly the national media, let's say. Like, I think he's already, a top 30-ish player in the league, something like that. I think Chet's probably a top 40-ish guy in the league, right? Anthony Edwards is going to be an all-NBA guy this year. There's just a difference. There are levels.
He might be first team, right? We did this last time, but like,
yeah, I think I would have him second team. Yeah, like I would still take Kawhi over him. It's kind of where my brain went with that. But like, he will be a second team all NBA player, which means he is a top 10 player in the league right now. Right. So there's difference between like year 30 and, top 30 and top 40 guys and like a top 10 guy. Like you would trade a top 30 and a top 40 guy for a top 10 guy every time.
No, I'm with you. I just anticipated making the other argument because one, I didn't look at all the comments off your tweet. Like I feel like that was the most engagement one of our pre-recording tweets has ever got. But there was a lot of I think people thought we were going to include SGA, right? Like I think because
and look, like if Shea was included, they're the number 1, and it's not even like
it's not close
a conversation because then it's okay. They already have a top 5 guy that's being included. Plus these other guys, like to me, that does trump. Like I would rather have Oklahoma City's overall future than I would San Antonio with Vic. They really might be like the only team where I think that's true, possibly. But like Oklahoma City is in just such a ridiculously positive place long-term organizationally. The problem is we can't consider Shea within this construct.
And the other thing is, I don't know that any of the other guys matter enough when we're talking about the level of players we've gotten into now. Like, I hate to go away from the nuance of the conversation whenever we were talking some other guys with the Pistons and the Pacers and stuff like that to break out those kind of hash out those rankings. To me, like, listen, I like Casey Wallace. I think Casey Wallace is a good player. Probably, he might end up being a starter. We've talked about Josh Giddey a lot on this podcast. To me, it just really comes down to J-Dub and Chet versus Vic versus Ant Edwards. Maybe Jaden McDaniel, like maybe in the next one, Jaden and Devin Vassell get in there a little bit, but ultimately I make that decision based off the top end talent because there's just not enough of the other to really factor in a ton for me.
Yeah, look, I mean, Jalen Williams he's such a stud. He's such a stud, man.
He's so good.
Like, I truly think the world of that guy as a player. He is the complete package as a player. There is not a single thing that dude doesn't do on a basketball court beyond, in my opinion, like create shots at like a truly, truly elite level. Right. So like, if you look at the numbers here, so like, I'm going to pull up the Jalen Williams numbers here as we're talking, right? Jalen Williams over his last 23 games, averaging 21.2 points, 4.8 assists versus 1.9 turnovers, 3.9 rebounds while shooting 54, 40, 83. And like, there have been games there, especially in the fourth quarter, where he's been the primary option.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They really like to let him rock a little bit in the fourth quarter. We might be fucking up putting them at number 3 ahead of
I'm telling you,
Minnesota.
I'm telling you this. I struggled with this because I'm like, are we sure that J-Dub is not potentially a top 10 player someday? And here's the thing.
Oh, no. I think he's going to be a top 15 player. Like, I will say that, like, straight up, I think Jalen Williams is going to be a top 15 player.
Then I think we're messing up, Sam, because at least with the Timberwolves, and I realize Ant could still go, but let's say Ant is 7 or 8 right now. If J-Dub is going to be 10 or 12 someday, Chet's going to at least be top 20, 30.
I'd say top 15, 20, yeah.
Like, at that point, the 2 is better than the 1. Now, I think J-Dub is so good in the fourth, Sam. He's so good in the fourth that I usually agree with you that you want the best player in a series to win a championship. I almost always agree. If J-Dub can turn into that dude in the playoffs, which I've seen him do it in fourth quarters, listen, I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate because I want to have some fun here. I don't necessarily agree with everything I'm saying. I think there's a real argument. Like, I don't know. I think there's an argument to be had. There's a debate to be had.
Okay, so like here's like the easiest, simplest way I can put this, right? Anthony Edwards is like 3 months younger than Jalen Williams. And is averaging over the course of his last 2 full seasons where he's made the All-Star game, 25 points on 46, 37, 80.
He's good.
While averaging, 4.8 assists. And he turns the ball over more than Jalen does for sure, but he has the ball in his hands way more too.
He also defends, right? Like, that's a big factor of this as well.
I will say this. I think Jalen is a better defender than Anthony Edwards.
No, he is, but Anthony Edwards isn't Tyrese Halliburton, is my point, in terms of if Ant didn't defend at all, I think those making the case for the Thunder have a lot better because it's like, well, Chet is going to be a top. He's going to make a lot of first team all NBA defensive teams. Yeah. Agreed. And Jalen Williams is better defensively than Anthony Edwards, but Anthony Edwards doesn't stink on the defensive end. He'll get after it. And so I think that's why Ant stays above this, is because of what he does defensively. I think you would find people who would take the 2 over the 1, even though in general, when it comes to the NBA, I just think you want the best player on the floor and figure it out from there.
Yeah, and like Jalen Williams, I think would have been an all-star in the Eastern Conference this year. I think Chet probably would have been as well, kind of thinking through it. Does he go ahead of Paulo this year? He probably does, right? And look, like, I guess like another case we have to make is like why Oklahoma City ahead of Orlando, right? Oklahoma City is just like a better.
I think we just made it though. Like Chet.
Yeah, like
Chet,
like I would, so like here's the case. Like I would take I might be wrong about this. I would take Jalen Williams over Paulo is my opinion, and Orlando fans might get upset about that, but like I would, if you want to argue otherwise, like I'm totally good with that. And I think it's completely reasonable. Paulo is incredible, and I don't think poorly of him in any respect, but Jalen is a better defender than Paulo. I think he's better. I think they're pretty close as passers, honestly. Paulo's really, really improved as a passer and playmaker, even as he's gotten more and more into the NBA. I just think Jalen is so much more efficient. He's a better finisher around the basket. I think he's a better mid-range shooter. I think he's a better three-point shooter. I think they're pretty similar in terms of shot creation. I know that Jalen is probably a year older than Paulo, if I remember correctly. And I think that there are physical gifts that Paulo has that also will allow him to continue to develop as a mismatch nightmare. I think there are also just physical gifts that Jalen has that get like drastically underrated. Him being 6'6", one of the strongest wings in the NBA, point blank, 7'2" wingspan, elite finisher, touch through contact, the whole thing. I think Jalen Williams, I would take Jalen over Paulo, and then I would take Chet over Franz for as much as I love Franz as well. The guy that we haven't talked about here is Giddey.
Sure.
I mean, look, man, whatever, your opinions are on him going to the playoffs and maybe struggling. Right.
Hasn't he shot it he shot it really well recently though, right? Like almost 40%.
You better believe that I'm about to get there, Bryce.
Get it on the screen, Sam. Get it on the screen.
He has been so fantastic through this last little stretch where they've really needed him. If you look at his last 14 games is what it's going to be. He's played 26 minutes a night. So not like crazy minute load, right? But enough to where like he's making a significant impact. And he's averaging 16.7 points, 7.4 rebounds, 5.8 assists versus only 2 turnovers, shooting 58, 41, 70. Giddey has that little like touch floater, right? Yeah, where he gets into that middle of the paint. And I think that's really kind of transformed things for him, particularly as an off-ball player and like cutter, where before he really struggled to finish around the basket, right? Now, when he's cutting to the rim, you have to actually pay attention to him because he will stop and pop in the middle of that middle of the lane and just throw up that little touch floater, right? Yeah. And if you're going to do that, if you're him, it's really, really tough to stop him. He's a really, really tough guy to stop because he's so big. That's the thing. Like Josh Giddey is 6'8", 6'9", and has all the skill in the world. Like might be like one of the 10 highest feel for game players in the league. Man, these three, we might have fucked up putting them at 3. I'm not gonna lie to you. Is we might adjust this as we're talking through at the end. Because I do want to talk through Jaden McDaniels and talk through some of these other Minnesota guys too. I think that it's probably right to have Anthony Edwards at 2.
Yeah. But
it's these 3 Oklahoma City guys make it really tough. They make it really, really tough.
No, that's what I said. Like I flipped this multiple times today. Like at one point I had OKC higher and then I moved them and it was always these 3 teams, and I think Vic, just because he is who he is, like it just kind of goes over everything because at the end of the day, you might have the best player in the game of basketball and that wins out over all else. But yeah, I just kept going like these 2 guys are so good. And I realize SGA is the man, but does that mean that J-Dub can't be the man? And I've seen him be the man in the 4th. And then what Chet does, and like those numbers you just put up, it doesn't have to be even that good. But if that plays in the playoffs for all of the Josh Giddey's going to get, like I made this hot take on a Thunder podcast because they made me make a hot take. And I think it was like Josh Giddey has a DNP in a playoff game. And this was when he was really like not shooting it well. And
and look, there are questions about that, like how his game is going to go in the playoffs, like with the way the teams have started to play off of him more. He's really started to adjust and figure it out on the fly on how to deal with that. But it's going to be different in the playoffs because you're playing great teams every single night and they're going to be trying to figure out a way to stop that.
I think teams, I've wondered about this. Like, should teams have just waited till the playoffs to start doing it? Like, why waste that in the regular season?
Because you have to because it's not always the teams
I
that
know.
are going to play them in the playoffs.
I
Like,
know.
there's teams trying to rack
It
wins.
gave him a chance to figure it out a little bit and find his confidence after it. But anyway, if he shoots and plays the way he has been recently, the graphic you put up, that plays in the playoffs and he'll be just fine.
I mean, the other guy, like you mentioned, Casey Wallace, like
Yeah.
Casey Wallace has had a great rookie year. He's shooting 50, 43, 76, splits right now, 7 points per game, really good on ball defender, has been a really great player. Like there's, if we were talking about a different team here, right? Like where would he rank right now on the Detroit prospect list?
High. Because he's such a good fit. Like,
would you rather have him or Jalen Duren?
I'm not playing this game.
Yes. Yes. He'd be I think he would be probably 2 or 3 for me in Indiana. Like he would be what for me in Charlotte, he'd be like, I'd probably have him over Mark Williams because, bigs are bigs. Right. So yeah, like I think Kaysen has been a stud. I think Kaysen has been so outstanding, and we're like kind of glossing over him as a guy, and he's going to be second team all rookie this year.
Would he be 2 in Memphis or 3 behind GG? Just because of GG's filming.
That's so gross. I'm going to have to do a redraft at some point, like at the end of the year here for this year. And where I put GG is like by far the hardest part of that because like there's so much upside there. And I'm avoiding answering that question, as you can see.
Hey, I mean, I avoided mine, so you get one as well.
I get one as well. And then, like, look, Ousmane Dieng still exists here. Like, Aaron Wiggins is in this conversation, right? Like, Aaron Wiggins has been really useful as a bench guy for them. Jalen Williams, the center from Arkansas, is like a solid backup for them, right? Like, there's just a lot of dudes that are here depth-wise, but, like, it's a real question. Like, would you trade Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren for Anthony Edwards? Seriously though, like that's what this comes down to, right?
It does. And I was like you, I think you said it real quick, and I should have said, like, I didn't factor in contracts at all. Like I guess this was in a vacuum. Let's say they're all starting the first year of a rookie deal, or they're all starting the first year of a max next year, or whatever it is. Like there's obviously cap implications to that question, right? Because eventually you have to pay J-Dub and Chet both as superstars, and you're only going to have to pay Ant. So like not taking that into account, I just think it's closer than what I thought going into it. Whenever you sent this to me, I thought it was going to be OKC no matter what. And then I was like, my philosophy, and this is why I ultimately have Vic 1 and the Wolves 2, is I just want the best player on the floor. I want the best player on the floor. But man, J-Dub's really, really, really good.
It's actually, like a really good question. Like, what percentage of Anthony Edwards is Jalen Williams going to be?
So that's why I struggled all day. Is I was like, that percentage,
75?
It may be higher than what people think. And then at what point does Chet and now here's the other thing that we haven't talked about, and I said we weren't going to get into it, but now we have to get into it. Jaden McDaniels doesn't suck. Like Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah, right.
Jaden
McDaniels is a better prospect than Josh Giddey.
He is not a non-factor in this conversation based off the way he defends. And if he figures out the shot consistently and being able to do a little bit off the bounce and stuff like that. So we're not just trading Chet and J-Dub. Like really you could break it down to Chet and J-Dub for Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. And maybe that's where there is like, okay, McDaniels puts you back over the top.
So like for me, it's the way to think about it is like, would you trade Jalen, Chet, and Casey Wallace for Ant? Because let's say like, I would rather have Jaden than Giddey, but like, let's cancel those two out for a second. Right. Then you have like Leonard Miller, Minot. Like I'd definitely rather have Leonard Miller than Ousmane Dieng, just being transparent, but that's just like me being who I am as a person. Man, that's hard. That's really, really hard. I'm not sold on this. We might come back to this and adjust as we talk through Ant now. Let's talk through Ant in terms of what makes him special. And by the way, we just did a big breakdown on Anthony Edwards. So if you want to go watch that, please go to the YouTube channel and watch it. It was really, really fun. We talked a lot
Yeah.
about what makes him special and why he is like really sped up his development by slowing down, right? Like that's the big key, right? Is that Anthony Edwards is, just arrived by being this incredible player. And like I couldn't be more enthusiastic to watch the rest of his career kind of unfold.
Well, and I think, what's really going to answer this question for us in some ways is what happens in these playoffs, right? Like I'm fascinated to see Anthony Edwards in these playoffs. Can he go be the best dude in the series for multiple series? I'm not necessarily expecting him to knock off the Denver Nuggets in the conference finals, but can he be unquestionably the best player on the floor in the first round of the playoffs? Can he be unquestionably the best player on the floor, perhaps against these Oklahoma City Thunder in the semifinals of the Western Conference? Like that first round game, it could be a bunch of different teams because they could be 1, 2, or 3, and then the play-in teams are all over the place. But so who knows who the matchup is? But I think these playoffs will give us a little more context to this discussion in general, but Anthony Edwards specifically, because we saw him with Team USA kind of be the guy. And that kind of jump started to this season where he's been really, really good. And does he carry it over to when the season really matters in this postseason?
I think that's right. Like I said, go watch that Anthony Edwards video. It was great. You can go see that on YouTube over on the channel. Yeah, seeing how this all goes, like in the playoffs, this is another big thing for me why I had to kind of put Anthony Edwards here ahead of this Oklahoma City team, is that we've kind of seen it in the playoffs already.
Sure.
And we've seen it like in important games for them. Like, do you remember that playoff series last year for Minnesota? Anthony Edwards dropped 32, 5, and 5 while shooting 48, 35, 85 from the field. He, like, just to repeat that, he dropped 32, 5, and 5 as a 21-year-old in a playoff series. He was obscene. He was insanely good in that series. I think he has a chance to be one of the 2 or 3 best players in the league.
I mean, even the year
as much
before,
as I love Jalen Williams, and again, I think the world of Jalen Williams, if he made second team All NBA at some point, that will not surprise me in any way, shape, or form. And I think it's like very, very possible that happens. And like, honestly, if you made me predict it, I think Jalen Williams will make second team All NBA at some point. There is such a big difference in levels from first team All NBA, best player on a title team potential, to like second team All NBA. There's just a huge difference. And like people can say, like, there are things, for instance, like Brian K in the comments brings up, like, I don't see a single thing that limits J-Dub's ceiling other than age, but he's already amazing for 22. I completely agree. To me, it's like more athletic shot creation compared to Anthony Edwards. We're talking about like literally probably the highest ceiling shot creator in the NBA right now, in terms of if things really break right for him in the next 2 or 3 years, Ant is going to be like a walking 30 to 35 points per game. Jalen is unbelievable in terms of strength, physicality, getting to the basket, has a really strong handle. He's just not as athletic as Anthony Edwards. He's just not. The explosiveness difference is real between those two in terms of physical gifts.
I think what this comes down to is what you think Anthony Edwards' ceiling is, as much as it is J-Dub's. I think a lot of people would agree with us on what J-Dub can be. And so then it comes to, do you think Anthony Edwards is legit top 5 for the next 6 to 8 years? Because if he is, I think we're probably right or correct right now. If you don't think that, if you think Anthony Edwards actually kind of consistently is more of that All NBA second team, then we're wrong. I think we're wrong if Anthony Edwards isn't a top 3 to 5 player over the next 6 to 8 years of his career.
I don't even know that it's, but for the next 6 to 8 years, to me, it's more what his ceiling is for like a 3-year window.
Just that peak.
Like there is a real chance he's the best player in the NBA for a 2-year window.
I agree.
Like once Giannis ages out, once Jokic like ages, a little bit further, Shea, I think, is like a real case for this, right? Like Shea, I think,
Luka
is going to have a shot at it. Luka's certainly going to have a shot at it,
and the
right?
guy we haven't talked about yet.
And the guy that, we haven't talked about yet, that's probably the guy that's going to like ruin all of that conversation, right? But like, if he's the best perimeter player in the league, man, that's a tough one. Like, that's a really, really tough one to
So,
get past.
and again, I think that's why I struggle. Is like I love Anthony Edwards as much as anybody, but is he that? And how many years of that does he end up being? And if he's not, give me what we have talked about, J-Dub being along with Chet and the other guys we've talked about. And that makes a lot of sense to me as well. So,
yeah. Like Thunder fan like brings up like a really good point. Like Jalen Williams at 22 is better than Jason Tatum was at 22. That's like, I don't think that's wrong, by the way. Like, I actually think that that's like pretty close. Jalen Williams. Well, okay, so maybe not. What was Jason?
Tatum was 26 points on 46, 39, 87, 7.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. Like that, he was an all-star.
Yeah. So no, he
he
was not, but it's close, I think.
Jason Tatum, also the year 21 season, was NBA All-Third team. The year before, at 21, he averaged 23 a game and was NBA third team.
Yeah, I actually do think that this version of Jalen Williams, to be real with it, I think that, man, I don't know. That was like super high. That was when like Jason like really figured out like the super high volume from three thing was like late in that year. Like the reason I say all of this is like, it's really close in terms of those two, like when they started to figure it out. Jalen got to the league a year later, obviously 2 years actually later, but the second half of Jalen's second year here is somewhat reminiscent of the leap that Tatum took in the third year of his career, where like he really started to go high volume from three, really started to attack in that way and pull up shots. I think Jason probably was better in his 22 age year than Jalen is.
Are we talking about
it's not that far off?
But I feel like that's how we're talking about J-Dub, is getting to a Jason Tatum like level, like pretty close, right? Like I feel like that's the credit we're giving him. And the argument, again, I think the argument actually comes down to, what do you think Anthony Edwards is? Is he a tier above that or not? He may be better than that, but if he's not a tier above it, then you take J-Dub and Chet. If you think he's and there is a tier above that, right? Like, wouldn't you agree there's a tier above Jason Tatum in the NBA right now?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
everybody would agree with that, I think. And so if you think Anthony Edwards is going to be a tier above that, then you probably have to take Anthony Edwards, because then you're talking about the Jokic's, the Giannis's, like those type of level of players who win you championships. And listen, like Tatum may win a championship this year. Like he may be the best player on that championship team, but that's a really good team around him that in this like context, we don't know that you're gonna be able to build that team around the players we're talking about. This is all in a vacuum.
Yeah, man, Jason's really good. I think I'm like kind of underrating Jason in my brain a little bit. Jason is probably a level ahead of Jalen. Like even like third and fourth year Jason is a level ahead of where Jalen is right now. Like really thinking back on it, he was like really, really sick. So like Derek Reynolds asks, like, where would Ant improve? Playmaking. That's the one.
Yes.
And I think that we're starting to see the first step of that, by the way, because the big thing we talked about in that video was slowing down. And the best way for Anthony Edwards to make that leap as a playmaker is by slowing down and by kind of, seeing the court a little bit better than what he sees it as now. And I think that will come as he continues to grow and age and mature. Man, like that dude it's just a different level of athleticism. I think like, I think that he has, like, I don't know, is he better than Jason Tatum right now is like a real question. I think the answer is probably, I think they're about the same. I think they're about the same right now.
I think they're both in the context they need to be in. That I think they both are really good with where they like. I don't know.
But Ant's
Maybe
the one driving the offense though.
that,
Whereas and Tatum drives offense too. Like I don't want to like sugarcoat that. Like he absolutely does. It feels more scheme based in Boston.
yeah,
And like that really reduces Jason in a way that I don't mean to. I kind of actually want to do like a whole thing on Boston and like what they're doing.
yeah.
Like I think that they've been like really, really good. I guess that my take is like I would have Jason very slightly ahead of Ant right now,
I think that's fair.
but in the same tier.
Sure. And you're
And it's
hoping,
because of the decision making with Ant.
and you hope that Ant gets to another tier. Like that's the hope, is that there's still another tier jump for him.
Yeah. And I think that like, Derek brings up like Tatum has a more defined role. It's like I think that like role definition, I think it's easier for Tatum, I guess, than I think it is for Ant within the construct of what Boston has offensively right now. I think it's easier for Jason than it is for Ant, and Ant is still doing what he's doing in the way that he is.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a hard. These top groups are really, really hard. But let's go to number one now. You have to have San Antonio at 1.
He might be the best player in the game in a few years. Like,
if you told me he's the best player in the NBA by the time he is in his 3rd year, I would believe that Victor Wembanyama has just like broken basketball in that way. If you told me he's the best player in the NBA by year 3, that is 100% reasonable and right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, this was the one that wasn't that hard whenever I just go based off what I believe. And that's that a dude that is 7'5" and is already doing what he's doing defensively and impacting the game that way. And then a kid I believe is going to continue to improve offensively. And we've seen it happen throughout the season with not like the best stuff around him, with a team that was experimenting with players around him during this season. I don't know how you don't take that guy that could be legitimately best player in the NBA for multiple years if he stays healthy. And knock on wood, he's been healthy this year. Like he's put a lot of that, for anybody who was saying that. I mean, he's put it to rest for at least a year. So, yeah, to me, this was definitely one you had to go with.
We're gonna do like a big Victor breakdown at the end of the year. Like really just dive into all of it. But for me, you look at the stats, they're completely absurd since he like really settled in, right? He's averaging in his last 40 games, right? So like not a small sample, basically since Christmas. 23 points, 10.4 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 3.7 blocks, 1.3 steals, 49, 35, 81 shooting splits. That is Victor Wembanyama. That's like mind altering, like unbelievable. He has been, I think there's a very real case. He's been like the best defensive player in the league since like maybe like mid-January. It's just that the team around him is like absolutely horrendous on that end. It's truly insane what he's doing right now. And we're going to go back to the clips. Like I kind of want to break down and like run through some of the clips. The way he is scoring like doesn't even make sense to me. Like there are clips there where like he just like does things that no basketball player has ever done before.
Well, and I don't think they even know, like I've watched so many games where his teammates refuse to throw him a lob or threw him a bad lob, or, like, I don't think his teammates have fully figured out how to even like play with him. And I'm not saying it's their fault. Like, I just don't know that who's played with a 7'5" guy in their career, like that can move and jump and has the, all of that he does. And so I don't necessarily, oh goodness. Well, then he finishes in transition too.
No, he gets fouled. But
he gets fouled. My bad.
It's absurd.
But there's a good one. Like you just throw it over the top to him, and he's not even shooting the 3 crazy efficiently yet. Like he really gets that down. just a
Then
casual.
he's making like 15-foot floaters in
Yeah.
the lane as a 7'4" guy. And then he's just gonna, someone's gonna go under a ball screen on him. And he's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna stop and pop like above the break and drill this three. And by the way, like this isn't the best game he played this week. Like that's the craziest thing. Like he dropped 32, 9, 5, 4, 3 on Golden State, like in a tight game where Golden State is like battling for their lives for a playoff berth right now.
Yes, exactly.
And that's not the best game he had this week because he dropped 40 and 20 against the Knicks earlier.
Yeah.
Like,
and another team that's needing to win games. So like they may not be playing important basketball, but he's doing it against teams that are playing important basketball. And so
this is the funniest one where Victor like gets this offensive rebound tip out and just look at his hand. He's just like, throw it up. Just throw it up to me. I'm good. Just toss it up. Yep. Sounds good. Just gonna like little son Draymond Green, who's like unbelievable at basketball, right? It's crazy. He's absolutely insane.
That first block was impressive because I think he was in drop there. He's playing off ball, but like he started to help and then he came away from it. And then he goes and ahead and blocks it. Like this one, I just
want to point out, like, this is crazy because he is in the gap here.
Yes.
Completely cutting off Trace Jackson Davis as the roller, using his length to like just be an obstruction. And then he like recovers somehow and gets there.
That's what I'm saying. He takes away the roller and then blocks the scorer at the rim. And what I love is he blocked it with his left hand. I love rim protectors that can, use both hands to protect the rim. He blocks that one with his left. It takes him too long to get there if he tries with his right. So, I mean, it's the defensive impact to start. And then as we've seen the offense come around, you remember his first summer league game when everybody freaked out because he wasn't very good? And it's like, man, we've come a long way since that opening game with what, I mean, he's, you talk about players live and listen, he's still a rookie. Maybe it goes off the rails. Maybe it peaks here, whatever. But I mean, this kid came in with so much hype and all of that. And so far he's lived up to all of it with the way that he's played. Man, he just bodying. Goodness gracious.
Just bodied Trace Jackson Davis. Like, look at how far he moves back Trace Jackson Davis. And then dunks on him. Like, just dunks over Trace Jackson Davis like it's nothing. And then he flexes on him.
So this is something we've talked about with Chet. And I don't know that we talked a lot with Vic, but like Vic has some, like he has some swag and some attitude, and he wants to be that dude and all of that stuff. He wants all of it.
The scary thing is that like a few of these clips here, what you're seeing is that like the post game is developing, right? Because he's actually unstoppable if he develops like a real post game, right? So like drop step after a face up, like what are we doing here? Like totally disgusting moves, right? Oh, and then just like, slips the screen, drills a three, like the whole thing's a joke, right? Like he is completely breaking my brain every time I watch him. We'll do like a whole Vic dive at the end of the year, but like, I don't think you can have anybody but him at number one.
Yeah, no, because he's the guy that has best player in the league, face of the franchise, however you want, or face of the league, however you want to say it. He's the one guy with the best chance on this list. Like we talked about, right? Anthony Edwards may be the best player in the league for a year or two. Like that's a real possibility. Victor has a better chance of being that for a longer time, barring health, than anybody else we've talked about tonight. And when you have the chance to get that, I think that goes over just about any other consideration.
Yep. Look, I can't get over watching him play basketball.
Yeah.
Is where I'm at on it. Like it's kind of that simple. It's kind of that easy. He is going to completely change the way I feel like we think about basketball. And they have all the flexibility in the world. Like we haven't talked about Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, like those guys. Like they're almost superfluous to the discussion because like I don't even know if they're going to be on the team. Like when he's really at his peak. Vassell's a good player. Like I think Devin started a bit slowly this year and then like kind of worked his way into the season. and, kind of reminded people why he signed that big extension early, right? Like, you look at his numbers, like he averaged like 19 and a half, 4 and 4, and really started to come into his own, it felt like. If you look at his, last 32 games, it's 21, 4 and 5 assists versus only 2 turnovers, 49, 39, 79 splits for Vassell. He's been really, really good.
Yeah.
Sohan like is still a project. I still believe in Sohan, but like still a project, and we'll see where it lands. But like defender and like valuable on that end at the very least. It's just whether or not you want to surround Vic with like all of the shooting imaginable and just make it like an impossible stop on offense. It's probably what I would do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they're coming like next year. Like that's the thing. Like they're going to make moves this summer that set them up for next year.
Yeah, as they should, because he's ready.
Yeah, he's ready. Like that's the key. He's ready now. He's taken a leap every summer from like 3 years ago onward. Basically, he's going to get better this summer.
Yeah.
And they're going to go get somebody that's like a real vet and like a real star, I hope, and like make a run at this thing sooner rather than later.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be. And again, like I've just gotten to this last couple of years, but like this is only his second year being like the focal point of the offense, right? Because like 3 years ago, wasn't he wasn't playing as many minutes, right? But probably when he was
coming
younger.
up.
Okay.
Yeah, like when he was coming up, like he was like, if you go back and you watch like what was that? U17s with the French national team, like when he played like Chet and all those Jaden Ivey, like all those guys, like he was the best player on that team and attacked and everything. But the key is that like the handle is like totally different now. Like he can really, really, really handle the ball in a substantial way that makes it hard to guard him. Just a special dude. Like there's like, we think there's a chance Anthony Edwards might get to the point where he is a best player in the league at some point, right? But I don't think there's any way that Anthony Edwards becomes the best player to ever play basketball.
Yeah, no.
You can't rule out Victor Wembanyama from that conversation. I'm not saying he's going to be that, but I'm saying that you can't rule it out based on what we've seen so far.
There's a reason he was a generational prospect, and rightfully so.
Yeah. Like he is going to completely change the game on defense. He is going to average 30 plus points a game. He is special. He is truly, truly special. All right, Bryce. This was good. This was fun. This made me think. I'm glad we did it. And we'll do this again, maybe like after the draft or something.
Okay.
Where like, maybe we'll do this as like an August, like summer project, right? Where we like, look at this after the draft and after
the playoffs.
After the playoffs, and then have some of these guys, for instance, like Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, they'll be, phased out at that point, and go from there. So final rankings here while we're doing this. You had Memphis at 11. Or no, I had Memphis at 11. You had Memphis at 9.
Yep.
You had Portland at 11. I had Portland at 10.
Yep.
You had Toronto at 10.
10. Yep.
I had Toronto at 9. We both had Detroit at 8. You, it seems like, switched kind of mid with Charlotte and Indiana.
In fairness, I had Charlotte 7, Indiana 6 coming in. So like, I don't want to I should have to stick to my rankings.
Moving target. It's a moving target. Indiana 7, Charlotte 6. We both had Houston at 5. We both had Orlando at 4. We both had Oklahoma City at 3. Both had Minnesota at 2. Do we want to flip Oklahoma City and Minnesota?
I mean, I feel like I've talked myself into it, just trying to play the other side of the coin because I see a lot of argument to it. No, let's just leave it for tonight. Let's just leave it. I'll see what I feel like in the morning.
I think I'm going to say Minnesota at 2, Oklahoma City at 3 still. And the reason for that is that I think that there is a good shot that Ant can be the best player. Not a good shot because it's just really hard to win a title, but like I think Anthony Edwards can be the best player on a title team. As much as I love Jalen Williams, I don't know that I'm there on that.
It's fair.
And like, again, I literally said that I think Jalen Williams is going to be like second team all NBA and be like, unbelievable, like max worthy player. And I think Chet's going to be second team all NBA probably at some point too. It's basically like, would you trade 2 second team all NBA guys for 1 first team all NBA guy? So like the question there would be, would you trade? This is actually like a really interesting one now. Like, would you trade like Jalen Brunson and Jason Tatum for Luka?
With no other context?
I think I wouldn't actually. I think I'd rather, like, if you had Tatum and Brunson on the same team, I think I would rather have Tatum and Brunson than Luka.
That's what was going to be my answer.
Maybe we should have Oklahoma City at 2. I don't know. You might have, I don't know, tied for 2. But we'll say Oklahoma. We'll say Oklahoma City at 3, Minnesota at 2. And Oklahoma City is going to spike up these rankings to number 2 next in the summer anyway.
Yeah.
Because Minnesota is going to age out with Ant and Jaden, and they won't be anywhere near this list next year. And then San Antonio at 1, obviously. So, okay, Bryce, that's all I've got. I think
we missed
this and
we missed a heck of a women's basketball game tonight, Sam.
I watched the first half of it. I'm going to watch
I.
the second half with my wife here.
Okay.
As soon as we're done.
All right. I won't say anything then, but it looks like it was a.
I know who won.
Okay.
Fine.
Yeah. I was going to rattle off some of the box score numbers that are just ridiculous, but I'll save.
By the way, like sneaky, really fun thing I'm looking forward to. So I'm flying to the US tomorrow, right? And going to the Final Four and Hoop Summit and everything. It's always really, really fun to, on the Friday night before the men's Final Four, the women's Final Four happens.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so fun to watch those games with like a big group of people. Like last year, those games were on and I was with an old friend of the podcast, we'll say. I was with CJ Moore. I was with shout out Anthony DeVerno. He stopped by for a minute, works for Turner Sports, unbelievable guy, listener to the show. Big fan. Like we all just like kind of hung out like at the hotel bar, like where the coaches were and everything, and where the coaches stay at that hotel, and had a great time. Like we just watched the women's game and had some drinks, and it was a blast. And then we like went out and did I think that was like a party night of some sort. So it's always like a really, really great night to watch the women's Final Four though, early on in the proceedings.
Yep. And like I say, tonight was an amazing night for college between Clark and Reed, the Iowa LSU, and then tonight UConn and USC going at it with a bunch of talent there as well. So
yeah, we get Paige and Juju. It's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
And like, no matter what now, like we get, Caitlin Clark and, either Juju Watkins, like the elite of the present, or, the elite of the future, not to say Juju isn't elite already. Or we get, Caitlin and Paige, and like Caitlin is by far the best offensive force in women's basketball, but like Paige is like a 2-way, like dominant player. Like she's unbelievable. So I'm really, really excited actually to watch the like USC UConn game here. I don't know what happened in that at all. So.
No, it's in the first half right now. So I'm excited to turn it on and watch that. And that's how I'll end my night, is watching those two teams go at it. So
love it. I have to do a little bit of work here, unfortunately, because I have a top 100 board coming, Bryce. I have ranked my top 100 prospects in this draft. That'll be up at The Athletic later this week at some point. I just have to write up like Jared McCain, Donovan Clingan, Connect, those guys, everybody that came through the NCAA tournament this year, and really kind of dive into what makes them, have helped themselves, hurt themselves, everything like that. I'll probably write about like 5 or 6 guys, but the top 100 board is going to be the key piece of it. And I'm really, really excited to finally reshare a top 100 board. I feel like I haven't done that for where I'm at on players in a while. And kind of looking at top 100 boards like across the space, I think I'm going to be like way higher on Steph Castle than what other people are. Like I think my board just looks very different than what everybody else's does. So I'm like really excited about that.
Cool. It'll be fun. I'm excited to see it drop.
So yeah. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter for Pistons, NBA draft, and just general NBA content. Over at Substack, you can find some Piston stuff, some draft stuff, all of that. Pistons Pulse podcast for Pistons content. And then here, as always, Game Theory with Sam Vecenie.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. That's great. This will be back. We need to figure out when we'll be recording. My guess is probably Thursday, your time. We will see what that ends up looking like. I land in the United States on Wednesday. It might be like a Thursday morning. No, you can't do morning. You have to do afternoon.
It has to be early morning, just before I start school, like super early.
That's 0% chance of that. Because I'm West Coast at that point. Like that's just
that'd be really early.
Up, yeah, 3 a.m. to podcast with you.
Yeah.
So no, it'll be afternoon. We'll do afternoon on Thursday would be my guess. And we'll, keep you guys updated on it. But until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.